Yo, what's good? Welcome to Observing the Process. Before we start, I'm hoping you can help me out by supporting the show. You can rate and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. You can share it with your friends, you can blog about it, or discuss it on your own podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to my channel and like this video, or you can support it directly. You can do this by going to my website. I'll leave a link in the description. Thank you for supporting the show. Listeners like you make it possible. Today on the show, I had Andy Aledort. Andy happens to actually be the father of my good childhood friend Wyatt, so it was really funny to go back to Wyatt's house to record the episode. Andy is an extremely accomplished guitarist. He has taught many great guitar players, including Joe Perry of Aerosmith and others. We talked about how Andy got into music, some of his accomplishments, and his recently released book, Texas Flood, the inside story of Stevie Ray Vaughan. Please give it up for Andy Aledort.
In the land of China, people hardly got nothing at all.
No possessions?
And in China, they never go to church.
No religion too?
Or do magic.
Well, it's easy if you try, Dick.
3, 2, 1. Okay, we're live. Andy, how are you doing? Thanks for having me over.
Alex, it's great to see you.
Yeah, it's
Been a couple of years.
It's been a couple years. Man, I can remember coming in this house like playing with Nerf guns and all that stuff. It's pretty wild to be back here after all this time.
And you and my son Wyatt, because
Yeah.
people out there listening won't know that, you have the same birthday.
Right, June 2nd. Yeah, Wyatt and I, same birthday. Oh man, so many good times. And congrats on the book. So Texas Flood, the inside story of Stevie Ray Vaughan. So can you tell my audience a little bit about the book and your work on it?
Sure. Stevie Ray Vaughan is a guitar player that I got to know. He's a Texas blues guitar player who his first album came out in 1983, and I saw him for the first time in 1984. We were about the same age. Stevie's about a year and a half older than me. He was born at the end of 1954, and I was born at the beginning of 1956. And the way I discovered him was the same way a lot of people discovered him, is he played on a David Bowie record. He played on the record Let's Dance.
Right.
And specifically that song, the single, when it was on the radio, it got a lot of play. Yeah, I was just going to
We're just fixing the mic real quick.
There you go.
You good?
That's better.
Perfect.
And so his playing on that song in particular is pretty much like an impersonation of Albert King, blues guitar player Albert King. Stevie admittedly said, when I played on that song, I just played, I think his exact quote was, I sprayed Albert King all over that.
Yeah, okay.
That thing. And so I was familiar with Albert King, and the guitar solo started, and I thought, wow, Albert King is playing with David Bowie. That's such a crazy combination. Because Albert King is, is an older black guy, in the same generation as B.B. King, and, like the sort of first generation Chicago, Memphis, maybe a tiny bit younger than Muddy Waters or Howlin' Wolf, but, really the beginning of all that. So it seemed crazy that he'd be on a David Bowie record, especially something that sounded so much like a dance, like new wave.
Yeah, it was new wave at the time. And what I read from either a quote or somewhere was that you actually weren't a fan of Bowie so much. Was that true?
No, I like David Bowie a lot.
Okay. I don't know how I got that mixed up then, because it was something like it was just maybe unexpected to hear that.
Stevie wasn't really a fan of David Bowie, but he didn't dislike David Bowie. He just wasn't that interested in that style of music. No, by that point, I actually liked David Bowie a lot because there's a record that came out in 1980 called Scary Monsters, and it has the song Ashes to Ashes on it. And I thought that was amazing, incredible. So if I had to pick, that's my favorite David Bowie song. So I was a David Bowie fan. But I'm listening and I'm thinking, wow, it's Albert King. And then I thought, wait, maybe that's not Albert King. And I kept going back and forth in my mind. because it sounded so much like Albert King.
Mm.
And so then I was curious, and so I found out not long after that it was this guitar player, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Mm.
And part of the reason it was not difficult to find that out was I think the Let's Dance single came out in March or April, and then in June, Stevie's first solo album came out, Texas Flood.
Okay.
So somewhere in there, I realized it was this guy, Steve Ray Vaughan, who was coming out with a new album, and I got his album.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see a lot of similarities in what he liked and his playing style and my own, because the influence of Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton, and then just straight blues like T-Bone Walker or Albert King or B.B. King. You know, and I knew he was roughly the same age as me, so, and he played a beat-up Stratocaster, you know. It's funny, my main guitar is a 1961 Strat that I bought in 1973, and his main guitar is a 1962 Strat that he bought in 1974.
Okay.
Which I didn't realize that until recently.
Huh.
But I felt a kinship to him musically when I heard it. And then a year later, in April of '84, he played a famous club on Long Island called My Father's Place.
Yeah, this is something that I found interesting because my dad and I were passing by Diane's Bakery.
That's
and
right.
And
That's
I don't
the
know.
place.
So that is true that used to be my father's place.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. That I've always found something interesting about Diane's. It had a cool energy. I didn't know it had anything to do with music. I always just liked the building itself. So it's kind of cool to know it had a life before baking.
It's unusual, and the building is different. I mean, it's got to be, because it's so much smaller than my father's place was. So my father's place may have actually been where the restaurant is and not the bakery, or a combination, or it was a completely different building that got torn down. But that's where it was, in that vicinity. And my father's place was an amazing place. This is a whole other aside, but the guy who owned it and ran it, Michael Epi Epstein, that everybody calls Epi. Epi's still around. There's a new My Father's Place in Roslyn that I've played recently. But the thing that he did that was so cool was, after he opened the club in 72 or 3, he teamed up with WLIR, which was a brand new radio station. And basically, like, Dennis McNamara was a DJ there and like invented the term progressive radio, because Epi was very smart. He said, let's do live from My Father's Place, broadcast on LIR.
So that was kind of new for that time?
It was brand new.
Wow.
And,
so common now.
Yeah. And so it was a great way to promote the club. It was a great way to promote the radio station. And then those recordings, you know, some of them came out. There were records. There's plenty of records that are live from My Father's Place. So anyway, it was great to see Stevie there. I saw Albert King there, and Muddy Waters used to play there, and then a lot of reggae. Later on, like Peter Tosh and Burning Spear and Sly and Robbie. So it was a great place to see Stevie, and he was phenomenal. You know, the place was small, only held about 250 people. And Stevie was just amazing, mind-blowing, and it was like one of the loudest things I ever heard. But it was just great. And then I met him. So I started writing for guitar magazines in end of 83, beginning of 84.
Yeah, this was something that I was interested in, is just like the compiling of the book. Because just for people who haven't read the book yet, the style of it I found interesting. It's kind of a collection of memories.
Yeah,
right? And it's kind of in
history.
chronological order. So it's really cool that, I guess, so did you do a lot of the work of compiling it? Like getting all the quotes together, or?
Well, the way that worked is, and the reason we did it that way is that my co-writer, Alan Paul, had written a book on his own 5 years ago called One Way Out, the inside story of the Allman Brothers Band. And it was all in oral history fashion, meaning 80% of the book is just quotes. But he was and is a writer for guitar magazines too. He started in 91, I think. He's about 10 years younger than me. And over the years, he sort of just became like the guy that did the Allman Brothers stuff. Um, so he ended up being the guy who interviewed Greg Allman the most, or interviewed Warren Haynes, or Dickie Betts, or Butch Trucks. Like any kind of broader became like the jam band guy. So if it was the Dead or Fish or any it's because the Allman Brothers is his favorite music. So I'm sure he was begging to write those stories. And then after 10, 15 years of doing it, it just made sense because Greg Allman and Dickie and J-Mo and Butch Trucks, they knew him. He could go meet them on the road. Maybe a couple times he hung out on the bus for a couple of days. So his access became greater than most writers because they knew him. So anyway, so he wrote this book in that style, oral history, because he had done and compiled these interviews over a 15-year period or something like that. And the book did well. It became a New York Times bestseller, written for St. Martin's Press. So about 4 years ago, something like that at this point, 3.5 years ago, St. Martin's asked Alan if he wanted to write another book. And he said that he did. And, we do even run around the country doing these book talks. And he always said that he really had to think about, who would it be? Because he was without question that the Allman Brothers were his favorite band, and he was very passionate about it. So he had to think, well, what other musician is there that I feel this strongly about? Because to write a book like this and put in the time and the work, it needs to be someone I'm that passionate about.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into writing a book.
It's nuts. It's really nuts. And so he decided Steve Ray Vaughan, but he also, we met each other in 93, I think, or 4. And it's really kind of funny. I was at another magazine for 10 years. Like I said, I started writing for magazines, let's call it 1984. And so for 10 years, 84 through 94, or the end of 93, I was in a magazine called Guitar for the Practicing Musician that was owned by a music publishing company, Cherry Lane Music. So during that time, I did a lot of transcription books just for their book publishing division. I did transcription books for Hal Leonard, is the biggest music publisher in the United States, if not the world. So I did hundreds and hundreds of transcription books of Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and newer bands, as we move forward, Pearl Jam or Nirvana or Metallica, Guns N' Roses. It was like everything. Because at that time, guitar transcriptions the idea of a guitar transcription, a super accurate transcription of the guitar solos and all the guitar parts, was a new thing. It didn't really exist.
And just to clarify, a transcription is like you're listening to the music. And
I listen to a record and I'm able to write down exactly what the guy's playing, the rhythm guitar parts, the solos. And because of my knowledge of the guitar and studying the guitar, because there was no YouTube in those days, you couldn't watch. I'm making the best educated guesses I can about where on the fretboard or what strings or what fingers the guy's using. And then there's also a lot of idiosyncratic techniques that are unique to electric guitar. So that could be anything from using a tremolo bar, which makes the pitch go up and down, or distortion, which when you use a lot of distortion, you can get these sounds that are, you can get feedback, which means the strings are ringing. Jimi Hendrix used feedback all the time. So one of the things I did was I standardized the way to write these things down in music notation. It didn't exist.
Wow. So you invented something in a sense.
Did.
That's crazy.
I created a language, a nomenclature. Too bad I couldn't get paid for that or copyright that.
But you'll go down in the history books right here on this podcast.
Right. Well, I mean, all these years in, I mean, that was 35 years ago.
Hmm.
So, I've met hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. And still to this day, it happens. People say, oh, like I've been, because I still write
Mm-hmm.
in Guitar Magazine. So they say, either they'll say, oh, I have all your articles from the 80s, or I've been reading your articles since the 80s and I still do. And because most of what I've done has been instructional stuff,
Yeah.
there are people like Devin Allman, Greg's son, or Luther Dickinson from the North Mississippi All-Stars,
Okay.
guys that are about 40 years old now, who they think of me as their guitar teacher. They've told me that.
Wow.
They're like, you're the guy. Like, I learned how to play because of you. Like, even though their dad, Luther Dickinson's dad, is Jim Dickinson. He plays piano on Wild Horses, the Rolling Stones. He's like legendary studio musician. So, I mean, it's a nice thing. I mean, believe me, there's a lot more people that aren't famous that have learned from my stuff. That's just as nice. But I had to come up with a standardized way of making symbols that represented certain things that are really specific to the electric guitar.
Right. But you're kind of building on something. Like there's a foundation to writing music, and then maybe you're adding stuff that wasn't like.
There's a foundation, but I mean, there were like finger tapping techniques, like Eddie Van Halen playing Eruption. That just hadn't been. There'd been nothing. I mean, finger tapping in that way, for people who don't know, when you play the guitar, one hand pushes the strings down on the fretboard at a certain points along the string to make the different notes, and then the other hand picks the string either with a fingertip or with a plectrum, a guitar pick. But there's another way to make notes, which is you take the pick hand and you actually, with one of the fingertips, just hammer it down hard on the string, and that'll make a note sound. And Eddie Van Halen uses that technique to play very fast phrases, where there'll be, say, two notes that are fretted in a conventional way with the fret hand, and then a third note added by tapping with the pick hand, by tapping onto the fretboard, and these fast triplets. But there was no standardized way to write that down. So in 1983, 84, I had to come up with ways of writing those things, along with all these other idiosyncratic electric guitar techniques like pinch harmonics and feedback and bends and vibratos, like everything.
Wow.
There was no standardized way. And there was a variety of things that had been done, but, like one book it would be one way, another book would be a different way.
Yeah.
Tablature is something that goes along with standard music notation, is just what you think of when you think of somebody reading piano music. But there's something called tablature, which is a 6-line staff that represents the strings of the guitar, and then you just use numbers. The numbers tell you the fret. So the lowest line on a tablature line is the lowest string on the guitar, and if it says 5, then it means the note is sounded at the 5th fret of that string.
Okay.
6th string. And tablature goes back to the 12th, 13th century or something like that, lute music. But I mean, I got a book that's sitting up there called Music Notation by Gardner Reed. And I had learned a lot about how to write standard music notation correctly. I took a class in scoring for orchestras and big bands and stuff. But I didn't know everything that there is to know. I mean, I still don't, of course, but I didn't have as well-rounded knowledge of all of the rules of standardized music notation that I needed. And then I was going to have to build on top of.
Yeah.
So I got this book, Music Notation by Gardner Reed, that goes back to the earliest incarnations of when people were trying to write music down in blocks and squares, and the invention of what became modern sheet music and I guess modern means, by the 17th century,
Mm. Right.
that became a standardized thing. And then learn all those rules
Mm-hmm.
and then bend them and change them or add to them for specific for the guitar. So that's a whole thing unto itself.
Yeah.
It took a while, but for whatever reason, there was a period of time in the first few years, the early part of the 80s, where different publishing companies still use different methodologies for ways of writing these things down.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time we got to the end of the 80s, I have to say that 90% of the things I came up with were absorbed into standardized what everybody
Wow.
did. And then there was some other things that I changed my mind about a few times over the years. And then I'd see what other companies were doing and I'd say, no, that's good because it needs to be the same thing. Like, anybody who's buying something, they're not going to look to see what company published it. It needs to be, it all needs to be the same. And it just did. It homogenized over time. So, but I mean, that's also the thing that led me to Stevie Ray Vaughan and a lot of other musicians. Since I was a guitar player, I became a writer just by default. I went to art school. I got a degree in art. I went to School of Visual Arts, got a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And I was much more interested in art than music as a teenager. But I always played the guitar. I loved the Beatles when I was 8 years old. Saw them on Ed Sullivan, like a lot of people my age. So, but I played very recreationally. Like my friends when I was a teenager were all much better musicians and guitar players than me. It was not my priority at all. So, I start going to college in 73 and then I just start playing music all the time.
And you're going for art, right?
So I was getting.
So what kind of art are you like? Is it a general art degree?
It was fine art, so it was painting, sculpture, drawing. Okay. So that's what I was doing all day, and then at night I had a band, and I would play like 4 nights a week, and so it was just music and art. It was great, it was my two biggest loves, and but I became really serious about music and playing. I practiced like 6 or 7 hours a day.
Wow.
Or any moment that wasn't spent creating art or being at school or commuting. But while I was commuting, I would be practicing on my invisible guitar in my mind. I get out of college and I'm playing in bands and, not making enough money just by that. So I became a house painter. I painted houses for 6 years. 6 years. And it was great. It was a great way to make money. I was my own boss.
What part of the country?
Dude, I was living in Little Neck at my parents' house.
So you grew up in Long Island?
Well, Little Neck is Queens. When you're from Queens, you make a distinction between
Great Neck,
same landmass.
Yeah, that's what's always interesting.
Great Neck is Nassau County.
Okay,
it's Long Island.
Yeah,
but Queens is one of the 5 boroughs.
Of course, so you're from New York City.
Yes, exactly. So it's
so you were
funny.
painting houses out there, and that's where you grew up.
I didn't start by painting houses there. The thing that got me into house painting was a guy I went to college with.
It's a big thing for college students in Burlington, Vermont. A ton of kids, they do it in the summertime as well.
I think painting houses is like a great thing to do anyway because, like I said, you can be your own boss and you can make, nowadays, or at least like the last 20 years, you can make a lot of money painting houses. People charge exorbitant fees for house painting. That not so much in the 70s, but it was great for one. What happened was my buddy that I went to college with, his family had a painting company in Darien, Connecticut. And so we graduate and he says, my brother who runs this company, it's September and he basically has all of September and all of October because by November 1st, it's really cold out and you can't really paint outside anymore. He's got like 25 houses that need to be finished or something like that. So they were just recruiting everybody that they could find to hand him a paintbrush. And it was really funny because I remember the first day, my friend's brother was like, "Here's how you wallpaper. Here's how you sheetrock." Like in one day, like I'm going to learn all that in a day. It was like ridiculous.
Crash course.
Yeah. And he'd been doing it so long, like he could wallpaper a room with his eyes closed. It would look perfect. You know, he's doing plumb lines and he's throwing the paper up and he's hitting it with glue all by himself, like just bing, bing, bing. And I'm just watching it like, this is not helping me. Like, I'm not going to be able to wallpaper like that. That's crazy. But I did learn how to paint houses and to the level of they like to do restorations. Like, it wasn't just throwing on a coat of paint. Like, you know, the company had a good reputation and a lot of beautiful colonial old houses up in Connecticut. Oh, yeah. So, you know, you had to learn to do it to a certain level of quality, which was good for me to learn. So I spent 6 years painting houses and playing gigs. And then this opportunity came to write for a guitar magazine, actually to do transcriptions. That was the first thing. They needed transcriptions. So
as you're playing gigs over this 7 years, are you touring with a band or are you just kind of like solo or?
No, I was playing in bands, but like on Long Island, New York City, Connecticut, New Jersey.
As I was reading the book, I found interesting was it seemed like Stevie went in and out of so many different bands throughout the course of his life. And it seems like maybe a lot of musicians do this. And I don't know, I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is it common to jump in and out like that or?
Well, yeah, because most musicians, or maybe I'll put it this way, some musicians go into it so they can like be an artist, you know, write their own songs, try to get a record deal. They have no desire to play other people's music. So they're not going to get gigs in a traditional way. They're not going to play weddings. I didn't want to play weddings, I could tell you that. You know, like all through college, I had friends that were in wedding bands. And then when I got out of college, and my friends that were the same age as me and got out of college, many of them just went straight into wedding bands because you could really make good money. Club dates, they call them club dates, being a club date musician. So that's weddings and bar mitzvahs and private parties, you know, wearing a tuxedo but they were all miserable. Yeah. But I mean, they could, especially in the 70s, you know, like if you had a gig that paid like $200 or $300,
that's pretty
good. And then
you
had 3 of those a week. And your rent was like $300 a month.
Yeah.
And gas was 50 cents a gallon. Like those guys were rolling in dough. Like they had more money than they knew what to do with.
Wow.
Like they'd make their month's rent in 2 gigs, and they might do 5 gigs a week and then 20 gigs a month. Like those guys had money. They were all driving nice cars. You know what I mean? But they were all miserable because they had to play weddings and wedding music and. I just could see that I had no interest in. I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah.
I played a few weddings, but many of them stopped playing the music they liked, and they stopped. And this was true for session musicians I knew too, who became successful making albums and making really good living, just playing on other people's records. They wouldn't play guitar at home.
Well, I think that speaks to being an artist versus, you know, treating it as a job. Like they're doing it just to make money. So
a tradesman. Yeah.
It's almost like the same thing as like fixing the like being a plumber or something. Like you're going there just to do a job and then you get out, you don't want to do plumbing at home again. But you as an artist, like if you're doing it just for the sake of the love, like the drive is going to continue probably.
Well, I could see that. And I said, you know, the last thing I want to do is make music something that I don't want to do, you know, or my relationship to my instrument or whatever. I saw it happening to a lot of people I knew, aside from the obvious of like, you know, there's nothing musical normally about being in a wedding band, being a club date band, and playing.
Well, now
bar
it's
mitzvahs
evolved
and
into
stuff
being
like
like a
that.
DJ. It's kind of like that's what the evolution of wedding or club music has been.
Yeah, they don't even. I mean, it's
They don't hire bands anymore, right? I haven't been to too many weddings, but it just depends on the wedding.
The nutshell version of all this is when the stock market crashed in 2008, 2007, 8, whatever year that was. I think it was 2008.
Yep.
A lot of these sort of extra money that corporate types had vanished because it was a pretty severe stock market crash.
Right.
So it actually has had a lasting effect on a variety of things. And one of the things is the money for parties and for hiring club date bands. I knew lots of guys in club date bands that they would do these showcases once a week for like 5, 6, 8 couples that were getting married and planning their wedding 2-3 years in advance. So the band would play a show for 8 different couples, and the couples, let's say 5 of the 8 would say, I want to hire your band. And my wedding's 2.5 years from now. And these guys were making a lot of money, and all of that ended around then, like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the money, the extra money, I mean, times change, but that is what precipitated all of that. And the other thing is country clubs. People start quitting, golf clubs.
Oh yeah, I
country
just had
clubs.
this dude Soups, John Scavarla. And he was telling just the other day. He was telling me about how he builds Kiko trails. I don't know if you know about the.
I do.
Yeah, so he was telling me that the stock market actually saved the crash.
Really?
Saved Kiko
How
trails
come?
because the trails are basically on the borderline of the golf course over there.
Right.
And in 2008, they're coming to Scavarla and they're like, yo, like we're probably gonna have to tear this thing down. Like we're gonna level it. And then all of a sudden the stock market crashes and they don't have the money to even level it.
Right.
So they're like, here, this is the deal. Like, long story short, he's the lesser of two evils, like these other ATV dudes that are like going through there and like making more noise than the motorless BMX bikes. So it's crazy that the stock market, in a sense. Anyways, I jumped off of this because you said golf courses.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it had its effect. So it is a similar thing. So anyway, that changed the landscape for musicians. But I guess that is a whole other topic. But so just for me personally, I didn't want to play music I hated. That's not why. I had the opposite. I would say I'm only going to play music I like.
Right.
And that's why I'm happy painting houses.
Right. And before we jump out of college, I learned when you were at Hartford, you were a freshman, you had a senior roommate, and he was really good into music. Can you tell me about that?
He wasn't my roommate, but that's an interesting.
Or no, the guy next door. Sorry.
That's an interesting story in and of itself. What is kind of important about all that is, so I skipped 3rd grade in elementary school. I went from 2nd grade to 4th grade. And it was good because in those days, like if you were born a certain year up to the end of December, you'd be in 1 grade. But then if you were born 3 days later, January 3rd, you'd be in the younger grade.
Right.
Even, if there was a week between you and this other person,
There
they'd
has
be a
to be some
grade
cutoff,
ahead of you.
Yeah.
And I don't think they do it that way anymore. They might have a more reasonable way. But so I was born in the beginning of March, and I had a lot of friends that were born in October, November, December. So they were almost the same age as me, but they were a grade ahead of me. Now we're talking 2nd grade, I'm like 7 years old or 7, 8 years old. But my mother was an English teacher. She mostly English as a second language.
Oh, really?
And she was also a musician. She was a singer and piano player and a part-time actress. But she had me reading like crazy when I was really, really young. And I make jokes about it. Like, I think she gave me great expectations to read when I was like 7 years old or something. Things that were way, way over my head. I was trying to read
Mhm.
Moby Dick, when you're 7 or 8 years old.
I just started to try and read that right now. It's
Yeah.
not easy. Dude, the English is crazy in that book. It's not modern.
No, I mean, but she was just giving me, and so I took a reading test in 2nd grade. Now, whether it was a combination of luck or actually I was a good reader, they said I had 5th grade reading in 2nd grade. So they skipped me to
Oh,
4th
wow.
grade. But it was great because I felt like I was more with people that I was friends with and closer to my age.
Interesting.
Then in high school, so I'm a senior in high school. I'm only 16. And they said, in September, they said, if you double up on English, you can graduate high school in December.
Wow.
Like you don't need to go the whole last semester,
Interesting.
January to May.
Never heard of like halfway through a year, like being graduating.
So I said, fine. So I doubled up on English.
Huh.
And then January, I went to college.
Is that something you think was a good thing? Because a lot of people.
It was great.
Yeah.
Although I had a nervous breakdown, but yeah, it was great.
Oh, wow. Because
almost.
Yeah, well, the last stretch of senior year was actually when I came into myself as a person, and I think I like became friends with a lot more people that I wasn't friends with for the whole part of high school. So I'm just curious. That's like fast forwarding so quickly through so many things.
Well, I could tell you that, the high school part of it, like every other part of it was great. Because I did become like the youngest kid in most of my classes, or one of the younger kids, because I had skipped a grade.
Right.
So my friends, many of them were a little bit older than me, which had its benefits in a lot of ways from being around kids that were, even if we're talking months, but some of them were more than that. And then they might have had friends or older brothers and sisters. And then as a musician, in a variety of ways, you get exposed to other things. My sister was 2.5 years older than me too. So, like her record collection. And she came home with Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde when it was a brand new album in 1966. And I was 10. And it was, like a huge moment that I'll never forget, So, and in those days, there were records coming out like every day that have gone on to be thought of as the greatest records ever made, whether we're talking about
Special Time in
Sgt.
music,
Pepper's or the Beatles' White Album or Hendrix' Electric Ladyland, whatever. Like, I remember when this was just the new record. Like, hey, did you hear Hendrix's new record? Oh, did you hear that song, All Along the Watchtower? It's pretty good. Like it was all brand new.
Yeah.
This band Cream has an album called Wheels of Fire. Have you heard that? Like it was brand new. And you put it on and go, wow, this is good.
It's a weird thing to think about, like that music being brand new,
The Stones, Let It Bleed, Honky Tonk Women, like hearing that for it was brand new music. Like, nobody knew it. And you'd go, this is good. Van Morrison. I mean, it's gone on to be like considered some of the greatest music ever. Certainly some of the greatest American music ever, pop music. So anyway, that was a bit of a, or I should say, going to college at 16 was shocking.
Yeah, that's
because
heavy.
my roommates, I had 2 roommates, and they were freshmen in college too, were 18 and 19 years old, which was more normal.
Yeah.
I'm 16. I did turn 17 in March.
Right.
But,
Where'd you go to? Oh, it's Hartford, right? Hartford.
University of Hartford.
Yeah.
So aside from, the fact that all the girls were 18 and 19, they were the scariest thing ever when you're 16 years old.
16 years old, that's young.
And the
man.
girls are 18 and 19. They're afraid, it's like, they're very scary. The next room, next to my room, was a senior graduating. Part of the University of Hartford is the Hart School of Music, which is a very respected classical conservatory. And a guy named Tom Mariano was like the star classical musician, not just classical musician, but he was a fully trained classically trained musician. And he was in the next room. He had his own room, it was a tiny little room, like this big as this room, maybe a little bigger. But he had a Fender Rhodes in his room. And from like my first couple days there, he would say, "Oh, hey, come in my room," and he'd put on an album by all these jazz artists that I didn't know, even though I grew up. My mother being a singer, with Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald, and some jazz records, hearing that in the house. But this is like the jazz of that era. Like he would put on a Bill Evans album, piano players, or he'd put on Chick Corea or Keith Jarrett, like the cutting edge of jazz, and guys that were just making names for themselves at that time. And he'd put a record on and he'd play along to the record like he could play all that stuff, like the most advanced modern progressive jazz. He'd lift the needle and say, "Oh, this is what's happening." And so I would spend a lot of time in there. People would come over and just hang out in his room because he would. That's what he would do. He was like a guru. I mean, he was super positive. And we smoked a lot of marijuana. And so, it was really easy for hours to go by with him just playing records, playing along to the records, talking about music.
Right.
And then he would ask me to play with him. Like he had a stand-up bass in his room. He'd say, "Andy, play stand-up bass." And I'd say, "Tom, like, I don't know how to play stand-up bass." He'd say, "I don't care, just play." So I'd play and he'd follow me. Like he would play it to whatever I was clanking away over there. And so he was like the first person where, you really felt like, music was this life affirming force that you could have in your life. Like it was up to you, like nutrition, like you could take sunlight, or whatever, like you could take in as much of it as you wanted.
Yeah.
And he made me want to take in as much as I could. So I started to play 6-7 hours a day because of Tom.
Wow.
I'd walk out of his room and pick up my guitar and I couldn't put it down and play along to records and try to do the best I could. He was so inspiring. He was one of these people who lived, ate, breathed music, and was just on that wavelength. Like it was like something to aspire to, And then I saw his senior recital, and it was complete. It was like mind blowing. He had 3 keyboards, like in a little sort of square type thing, but there were 3 of them.
Oh, okay.
Like a U shape.
Yeah.
He had a grand piano, an electric piano, and another keyboard. And he would be playing 2 different keyboards at the same time and mixing classical music, Mozart with his own improvisations. The guy was a genius.
Wow.
And I always wondered through the rest of the 70s, I wonder whatever happened to Tom Mariano. This guy was like a genius. But somewhere around 1978, I was a big Frank Zappa fan. This guy started playing with Frank Zappa named Tommy Mars, who I would see with Frank.
Sure.
And I didn't realize it was Tom because Tom had been kind of heavy, had a big beard, and Tommy Mars was not heavy, didn't have a beard, and he was Tommy Mars, and he wasn't Tom Mariano.
Okay.
And he looked different, and he was, I didn't get to sit like in the first row. I'd go see Frank, and I'd be way back there. So this little guy up there was Tommy Mars. He was Frank's keyboard player, and I'd be like, wonder why whatever happened to Tom Mariano. And then in 1981, I went to a concert where I was in the second row, and he had gained some weight back and grew his beard back. And it was just like, I'm just looking at him. I come in, and it's Tommy Mars, right? I'm at a Frank Zappa show, so the keyboard player is Tommy Mars.
Yeah.
And then it just hit me. I go, oh my God, that's Tom Mariano. He's been Tom Mariano the whole time. This guy I've been seeing and listening to on records.
Oh, man.
So I went back the next day because Frank used to do these Halloween, like 3-4 nights in a row, 2 shows a night. And sent a note in, hey, I lived in the dorm room next to you 8 years ago. and he came out, and it was him, and it was like fantastic. So anyway, Tom was really, no pun intended, instrumental in just that embrace of music and this whole mindset of like I said, it's like nutrition. Like music just became this thing. He was so positive. Like you never saw Tom not like bursting with enthusiasm about music. But he was like, it was pretty wild. He could pick up a book of like Bach etudes for the flute. And he didn't play flute, but he'd play them on recorder, he'd play them on another instrument.
Okay.
I mean, he was such a great, he asked one day, he said, let me borrow your guitar. He didn't know how to play guitar. But by the end of the first day, he could play guitar.
Yeah, I guess
he
there's
just
some
sat
people...
outside playing guitar. He's like, I have to figure out how this thing works.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that the next time something like that happened for me, so that was in 73. And then, I formed a band. I got out of college in 77. And one of my favorite guitar players was a jazz guitar player that Tracy and I, my wife, went to see with your parents,
Oh,
Pat
really?
Martino, about 10, 12 years ago. Maybe
Really?
12 or 14 years ago. It was a while ago.
Okay.
The four of us went to oh God, what's the name of that place?
In the city? Or?
Yeah, Birdland.
Okay.
We went to Birdland and saw Pat Martino. Yeah, it was really fun. It was the only time we had a chance to do that. And but Pat Martino is legendary, world famous jazz guitar player from Philadelphia. In 1978, he lived in New York City, and he was teaching. And so a buddy of mine saw the ad, Pat Martino's, study with Pat Martino in the back of the Village Voice. And so it was twice a month. And so I only took about 6 or 7 lessons from him over this 3.5 month period. But I mean, the very first lesson that Pat gave me was material that you could study for the rest of your life. Like it was just the heaviest, most intense. These systems for learning about the architecture of music on the guitar. That's the best way to put it.
Wow.
Like every possible combination of 3 strings. There's 6 strings on the guitar. So you could go 6, 5, 4, 6, 4, 3, 6, 3, 2, 6, 2, 1. 6, 5, 3, 6,
I'm not
5,
good at math,
2,
but there's a lot of combinations.
6, 5, 1, 6, 4, 3, and that's just starting with 6.
Yeah.
And the first thing he gave me was he mapped out every possible combination of 3 and 4 string groups. And he said, I want you to go home, and here's all these different chords, minor 6th chords, minor major 7th chords. Write out every chord voicing on every one of these string groups in like all 12 keys. Like it was like a lifetime of work,
Right.
So like seeing 2 weeks.
Almost impossible. Like
Impossible.
Yeah.
Not even almost impossible.
It is impossible.
Like impossible. And I remember I did so much work, and I came back and I'd written out hundreds and hundreds of chords. In this book, it took up like, I don't know how many pages. And I handed it to him. I said, Pat, look, all the work I did. And he just opened it for like a second. He went, oh, it looks good. And he just threw it. Because to him, it was like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, I'm glad you did it. But I mean,
It was more of like not a test, but just like, obviously this is almost silly. It's maybe like a first lesson. And like
his point was
more of a point to it.
that like, if you really want to, like, this is what it's going to take to learn. So you obviously didn't absorb it all. You wrote all this stuff down, and you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to absorb that. Like that was given. Something very zen about this whole thing, of like, you'll never. I mean, John McLaughlin, who's a very famous jazz guitar player, one of the benefits of writing for guitar magazines for years and years now is meeting all these amazing guitar players, some of the most important that ever lived, and getting to know them, and some of them interviewing many times. So actually, then I'd go see them and I'd hang out with them and I got to know them. And I asked, and John McLaughlin's considered one of the greatest jazz musicians ever lived, completely reinvented how to play the guitar, the absolute cutting edge of technical brilliance and speed and articulation and everything, inventing his own music, his own musical language with bands like the Mahavishnu Orchestra and Shakti. And I asked him once, I was about how he became such an incredible musician, and if he said something like, how did you go about mastering the guitar? And he said, well, it's ridiculous to say that I master the guitar. He goes, compared to what there is to know, and he held his fingers like a millimeter apart. He goes, this is what I know. And I was thinking, man, if that's what you know,
what do I know?
I know like a millionth of that.
Do you think that's what drives people to this kind of stuff? Is like the endless possibilities to mastering
Absolutely.
something?
I mean, it's no different. I think it's true for all the arts. I mean, art gives you affords you the opportunity to connect to something, and then art is supposed to be a reflection of life. It's supposed to reflect culture, and it does. And that's why the art of every era, is very valuable in understanding that era, what it was about in terms of the world or a given specific culture in a part of the world. And then depending on what part of the world that is, there's a period of time when it was America, and there's a period of time when it was France, where that became so influential, like rock and roll in the 50s, and then it got brought over to England, and all those English musicians were influenced by everybody from Les Paul playing this sort of souped up jazz, to being influenced by Elvis Presley and Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters. And so what does that lead to? And the Supremes, like a Motown, like early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, like black pop music, Temptations and Four Tops. And so Arthur Alexander. And so in England, these young kids are hearing all this American music. They're hearing Sam Cooke and Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett, but they're also hearing Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and so, all of a sudden there's the Beatles,
right? So it's a collaboration of a lot of different things.
Yeah, or the Rolling Stones, and then they come over here, the British invasion. So now America is being subjected to American music that's filtered through a British sensibility, completely different culture, with no understanding of America, like that people in America, like most people, they don't know who Muddy Waters is. And there's, racism and the racial divide in America. It's not to say there wasn't racial divide in England, but the beautiful part of it is, to them, they were hearing it without any of that stuff. They were just hearing music and being affected by it. And so the Beatles, were recording songs by these black artists, like You Really Got a Hold on Me, Smokey Robinson, or Chains, or Boys, or Anna by Arthur Alexander. What's that other one? I can't think of the name of it right now. But And then the Rolling Stones were more interested in Muddy Waters and some rockabilly like Route 66 and stuff like that. So I guess the point of all that is that that art that originally reflected America in the 50s ends up reflecting England in the 60s, which ends up reflecting America reacting to England in the 60s.
Interesting way to look at it.
But I mean, Hendrix was an American musician who couldn't get arrested, goes to England, sort of blows the place to bits, gets with two English musicians. He's black, they're white. They create a sound that never existed before that became known as psychedelic music.
Sure.
And then where was Hendrix coming from? Well, Hendrix was a master of R&B and soul, having played with Little Richard and the Isley Brothers and this whole faction of music, but also John Lee Hooker and Howlin' Wolf and B.B. King and Albert King and T-Bone Walker blues. But then he loved Bob Dylan, folk music. So, all right, here's this one guy, and his favorite music is Bob Dylan and John Lee Hooker and Curtis Mayfield, all in this one guy.
Yeah.
And so he starts writing these songs that have all of that in it. And he loves the Beatles. So he knows how to write pop melodies that are going to sell a lot of records.
Sure.
And he plays guitar better than anybody.
Yeah.
And then he burns his guitar and plays with his teeth and plays behind his back. And he's the most fascinating performer that anyone's ever seen too, on top of all that stuff. So that was a gigantic reset button. So he then comes back to the United States and they're like, what the hell is this? But I mean, it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't gone to England. So, it's crazy cross-pollination. But I mean, I guess this is a really long answer to, that's what art is supposed to be for. That opportunity is always there for anyone that wants it. And to tie this into the Stevie Ray Vaughan book, his brother Jimmy Vaughan, they were very close. And Stevie Ray died this tragic death at 35 years old in a helicopter 29 years ago.
Yeah.
And all these years, I've been writing about him, and what led to the writing of the book, or helped lead to it, was getting to know the guys in his band really well, and I started to record and perform with the guys who played with Stevie. Like after Stevie died, I got to know them really well.
Oh, wow.
And then Sony Legacy, the record label, would put out these posthumous releases, and I wrote the liner notes for them. So the record company, in its innocent way, because they knew I knew Jimmy Vaughan, Stevie's older brother, if I was writing the liner notes for a new, like a reissue of a Stevie Ray Vaughan record, or something that was new, completely different, or like a best of, like this double CD called Essential Stevie Ray Vaughan, they would always just sort of innocently go, oh, can you call Jimmy Vaughan and get a quote for the liner notes, something cool that be different, And I'd call Jimmy, and sometimes he'd get angry and go like, what? Like, they're not allowed to put that out. Like, what are you talking about? But, so, what the hell was my point going to be? In one of the times, Jimmy just said, well, if there's anything to learn or glean from my brother, it's that he lived the life he wanted to live.
Right.
And anything that he thought was cool, every cool ring or hat or scarf or boots, whatever, he'd buy them.
That's something I wanted to bring up is through.
So just to finish the thought, he said, so if if there's anything that anybody could learn from my brother, it's that you should find the thing that you love and do it, because that's what he did.
Wow.
And he lived the life he wanted to live, and he was happy, which is like, I mean, it's, you know, boiling it down in very simple terms.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of a beautiful thing. It's, you know, like, it's not easy to figure out what is that thing I love. What do I want to do with my life?
A lot of people spend a lot of time trying to find that.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
They spend their life trying to figure that out. But that was his point. He said, my brother did. He knew early on what it was.
Super special. And what I found interesting is like he kind of got into, I guess, blues or folk. Yeah, blues mostly. And it was mostly played by African Americans at the time. This could be true or not. And then he kind of like at one point in the book they were saying that his family was like, "Why are you playing that style of music?"
Well, Jimmy Vaughn says that because a lot of his or a handful of his relatives either liked the kind of music they liked was country music, or some of his father's cousins played country music, and his father had become friends with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, one of the most famous country and western swing bands of all time. And guys from Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys would come to their house and play cards and dominoes and get drunk and hang out. And so they grew up in that environment. But Jimmy said as soon as he started to play, he knew he wanted to play blues. And so his family members would say, why are you playing that? Why aren't you playing country music? And his answer was really simple. He said, I like this.
Right.
I don't want to play that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play that. And it's interesting because I've had the opportunity to talk to Stevie, but more Jimmy, about, you know, he has a love for country music. He's like a musicologist, great knowledge of all kinds of different music. But I mean, he's not going to play it. You know, it's just not. Jimmy Vaughn is a guy who's, you know, just like his brother. Like, he only played what he wanted to play. Like, he made that decision before Stevie did.
Okay.
And the thing that's in the book that's interesting is that Jimmy Vaughn, at the age of 15, was a really successful musician. And his younger brother, who was 12, Stevie, saw his 15-year-old brother becoming a star, making more money than their father.
Right. That was an interesting part.
And he was like the hottest guitar player in Texas, and he's 15. Stevie's 12, and he's like, well, I want to be like that. And so that's a whole other part of the story, is that dynamic between them. So, you know, it's important to us in writing the book. You know, I had done thousands, at least hundreds of hours of interviews over all these years, 33 years. And so when we made the pitch to St. Martin's to get the book deal for Stevie Ray Vaughan, we sent them a 135-page document. Like, well, here's a sample of what the book's going to be like. It was like more than a third of the book.
Right.
And they were like, this is good. And so then we embarked on doing like 400 new interviews with over 100 new people. So I say 400 because most of those people were interviewed multiple times.
Yeah.
So about 3 years was spent calling way more material. So it was really difficult to boil all this down because they didn't want an 800-page book. And we were banging against the confines of like they said, St. Martin said, well, we're not word count people, but 105,000 words is good. Not 110.
Wow. So they are.
And like, so that's only a 5,000 word difference. But it's a difference between a book that's under 400 pages and a book that's over 400 pages. And there's a lot of different considerations for that. One really simple one is it costs more money to produce a book that's bigger.
More pages, yeah. Simple.
And so then you have to charge more money for it when you sell it.
Yeah.
and they, have figured this stuff out. We don't want the book to be more than $29.95, $27.95.
Mm.
And there are people who don't want to. They're not even going to pick up a book if it's more than 400 pages, because they'll just look at it and go, "Oh my God, this thing is 600, 700 pages."
Well, what I really enjoyed is I listened to the audiobook as well. And what you did with that, which I find really cool, is, the book is laid out into different quotes from people or like
Right.
anecdotes. And they actually read some of the people. I don't know if every person.
No, it would
but some
have
of the
been
peop-
nice.
Some of the people did read their own stuff, right? Or
There was a budget for that too, so they didn't give us carte blanche. And in fact, sort of quickly after we had about 6 people or something like that who had said they would read their own parts, they were like, "Nah, that's it. Like, we don't have the budget for setting up recording sessions with all these other people."
I mean, it's a big endeavor to go into that. I would
Oh,
imagine.
absolutely. And I read, Alan Paul, my co-writer, and myself read all the prose sections of the books, of which there are
I really
many.
like that. You guys switch off every chapter, and
Exactly.
yeah, it's cool.
So yeah,
cool
odds
way.
and even chapters is either one of us. And then I have a couple quotes myself in the book, just from me, because of my personal experience having met Stevie. So that's in the book too. But Chris Layton, the drummer, read all of his parts and wrote the foreword and read his forwards.
Yeah.
And Tommy Shannon, the bass player, wrote the afterword and read his afterword. And then Jimmy Vaughn wrote the epilogue. He didn't participate in the audiobook, but we didn't ask him either because we were afraid to ask him.
Jimmy?
We figured he would say no anyway, so
really?
we didn't ask. The whole process of the book is still something that's really problematic for him in different ways.
Because you did mention at the beginning, like, you're very thankful to getting Jimmy's trust in a sense, and maybe you didn't even you can speak to this, but one of my questions was like getting Jimmy to trust you. Like, it's a massive deal.
Well,
for
I
him.
knew Jimmy for 30 years, and Alan knew him for 26 years or 7 years. And before he agreed to talk to us for the book, he told his family members that they could talk to us, which they said was mind-blowing to them. Because they said Jimmy has he's always said the opposite when someone's come, "Hey, we're going to write a book about Stevie Ray Vaughan or do a documentary or something." We would always ask Jimmy, "Hey, should we talk to this guy?" And he would always say no. So when he called them and said, "You're going to get a call from this guy Andy or Alan, you should talk to them," they all said that their minds were blown. That was like the exact term. They couldn't believe it. And then there were other important people like Susan Antone, the sister of Clifford Antone, who opened this very important club, Antone's, in Austin, that's still there. There were people who we had left messages, and all of a sudden they were calling us back saying, "Jimmy said that we should talk to you, or I should talk to you." And then eventually Jimmy said that he would talk to me for the book, and he did. And I sent him an advance reader copy of the book when it was done. But we started talking all the time. It was kind of cool. I'd call him or he would call me, like out of the blue, and just start talking about stuff.
Sure.
And Jimmy's kind of scary, and there are a lot of people who are afraid of him. And I don't know. I played for 12 years with Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers, and Dickie and Jimmy are a lot alike in that they've learned that you can have a sense of control or a modicum of control over what happens by having walls up and facades that protect yourself, and people won't talk to you, or it's easier to protect your privacy. And so Jimmy and Dickie are a lot alike in that way. But a really good way to cut through that, and I learned this with both of them, is to just be like bracingly honest, which a lot of people are afraid to be. So if you kind of disarm them because you're making it really clear where you're coming from, as opposed to being afraid if I say the wrong thing, like they might get angry at me.
Well, I think a part of that is like people in their position who are dealing with, maybe people trying to take advantage of them for certain reasons.
Oh,
So that's
absolutely.
why they put their guard up and they don't want to be
Oh,
taken
they have
advantage
good
of.
reason to.
Yeah.
Well, when you're famous, I mean, John Lennon talked about it. He said it got to the point where every single person that you came across wanted a piece of you.
Yeah.
Like there's no such thing as being left alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said it might sound insignificant, but if I'm getting in the elevator from the hotel room to go to the gig, and then I can't even be alone with my own thoughts for 2 minutes, people want something from me because of who I am, and I'm forced to be on all the time.
Must be
You
maddening.
just run out of energy. Listen, I could tell you, for me, I'm not a famous person, but like being on tour and in a tour bus, it's like being on a chain gang and you're around these other people 24 hours a day for weeks on end. You have to learn to like create this cocoon that's, an invisible imaginary cocoon, because it's draining to acknowledge everyone around you 24 hours a day. After 3 weeks of that, like you can't even see straight. You
Right.
can't think.
Yeah.
And
that's just
so
being on tour. Imagine like being famous all the time. You can't even go to Starbucks and get a coffee. You're just like, there's people. I don't know
Yeah.
how to deal with fame. That would be kind of
Well,
terrible.
I'll tell you something that Jimmy said, and I'm only going to say it because Jimmy said it for publication. He was talking about how difficult it is when your brother dies in a horrible, tragic accident. And he said, like, and he's talking about like now, I'll be like at the supermarket buying coffee. And he goes, and on some level, it might not be a conscious level, you're glad that you can go buy coffee because you're not dead. That's the way he said it.
Oh man.
He goes, I mean, he's going to be 70 years old. He's had health stuff come and go like anybody. So, and he knows a lot of people that didn't make it to their 70s or 60s or 50s or 40s or even 30s because of all kinds of things. So, but he said it, that's Jimmy. He says things in very matter-of-fact ways. He goes, you're happy you can buy coffee because you're not dead. And someone will come up to me and go, oh my God, I'm so sorry that your brother Stevie died. Even though it happened 30 years ago. And he goes, so now I'm standing in the supermarket with some person I don't know, and we're both crying.
Yeah. It's like,
And
why
he's
do you need
like,
to be reminded of that?
how am I supposed to make it through a day, like a regular old day, when that's going? And he goes, and I know they have the best of intentions.
That's the
They
other part.
mean it. They do
Right.
feel bad.
Yeah.
They loved my brother. They might love me. So, but how am I supposed to go buy coffee if I am going to be faced with your brother's dead? Like it's just the reality of what it's like to carry that around. And there's lots of other things people said to me just about, it's just very difficult. And Jimmy's done great. He's had to deal with something that was very terrible. And he said it to me. He said, look, the world misses Stevie Ray Vaughan. I miss my brother. So anyway, I feel lucky that I had the opportunity to write this book because Stevie was a guy I got to know, and he was a really good guy.
Yeah.
And so it was important to me because Alan didn't get to meet Stevie, and which is why he wanted a partner with me, to try to create the situation where the reader would get to know Stevie as a person from reading the book. And people that knew Stevie and were really close to him after they read the book said, wow, you really did capture Stevie as a person, which is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, nobody's perfect. That gets talked about in the book too. Stevie wasn't a saint. Sometimes when people die young and are famous, they get elevated to sainthood. So the point is made by his bandmates and friends. You know, he wasn't insane. He was, in fact, it's sort of a disservice to him to not acknowledge that he was a human being with human problems
Right.
and
I was interested
adversity
to
and
find out about his
emotional.
problems and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
was,
that's makes him that much more, a sympathetic, compassionate
mm,
subject of a
yeah,
book because he was a human being with struggles like everyone.
yeah, yeah. So for the book, the writing process and getting more into your career actually, for your interviews and stuff that you've done, like getting into, is it Guitar World?
For the last
Yeah.
5 years, yeah.
So has interviewing been a big part of that, or has it been mostly writing articles, transcribing, or?
It's been a combination, and I was at a different magazine for 10 years before that.
Oh, okay.
So, um, I mean, I would never studied writing.
Mm-hmm.
So to become a writer, it was like sort of by default. Um, but there are good things about that too, because like anybody, I have my favorite writers
Mm,
who, their writing style resonated with me, for one reason or another. My favorite music musicologist, music biographer is Peter Guralnick,
mm,
who's written all these great books. He wrote 2 Elvis Presley books that are great.
mm,
Last Train to Memphis, and I can't remember the other one right now, the name of it. And a recent book about Sam Phillips, Sun Records, called The Man Who Invented Rock and Roll.
mm,
It's a phenomenal book. And so when it came to my own writing, just like guitar playing or anything else, you sort of emulate the people that you like.
right.
And Pete's writing is just very, very direct.
Mm,
And he wrote a book about soul music, R&B and soul, called Sweet Soul Music. He wrote a book about blues called Feel Like Going Home. All his books are great
mm,
because there's no fluff. They're very down to earth, and it's all just well researched and well written, and never gets pedantic or boring. Just fascinating stories, and
mm,
so anyway, that's how I learned to write. And so, yeah, I got to interview and got to know like some of my biggest heroes.
right.
BB King, I interviewed him many times.
Mm,
He was the greatest guy. Um, and in its own way, had a huge effect on me
mm,
because here he is, the most influential electric blues guitar player that ever lived.
mm-hmm.
Happens to be the nicest person you could ever meet, the
Yeah.
most generous person
Mm,
with his time. And you don't you don't get more important or big uh, in the realm of blues guitar than BB King. You just don't. And he was just this wonderfully warm, generous person.
mm,
And I found in my own experience that the greatest of the great have always been the greatest people too.
mm,
Who's really warm, sensitive, generous, considerate. Um, so it's got to go together in
mm,
some way.
yeah.
And but along with that, I've done a tremendous amount of instructional stuff of my
Oh,
own, and
yeah.
I continue to do that. So there are dozens and dozens of DVDs, and there's a company called TrueFire that I have do a lot of stuff on the internet with. I have a channel, an instructional channel
Mm,
with TrueFire. So people could download audio, they could buy DVDs, they could
mm,
just go online and get downloadable lessons
mm,
in every format that there is these days. And that's been a nice thing too, because I've been able to connect. One of the nice things about technology today is I could do Skype lessons with people in
mm.
Israel or in Scotland or New York City.
All over, yeah. Just down the block. What I wanted to share with you about interviewing, the story, like the first time I interviewed someone I was in India actually, and we were on a shoot for a Holiday Inn, and it was like a travel guide. Like we went to some restaurant, And basically, I was just asking this guy very basic questions like why they should come to his restaurant. Like it was all bullshit. It was like not interesting. But
Right.
then we got into stories about how his restaurant had gotten shot up in this like terrorist thing. And just having a conversation with someone like that where you were so engaged, and it was just really exciting for me. And then ever since then I've kind of dabbled with it, but then when I started the podcast I got into it again. So I was just wondering like if you had any experiences like that. And I bring it up again also because today, for me at least, I in my generation we have a big problem with social media and always being like not really in the conversation.
Right.
So something that also really draws me to this style of, media is like I turn off my phone for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and that's unheard of any other time of the day for me.
Sure.
So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on, that the background of interviewing and kind of like engaging with someone that's a little different than a normal bar conversation.
Well, I mean, you know, every generation, there's a norm that you grow up, an environment, social environment, media environment that you grow up in,
Mm,
and your understanding of the world and your understanding of yourself and of time and of information and the way you take it in, all those things,
mm,
are dictated by, you know, whatever you grow up in. And so, I was born in the 50s. So, there were like 5 television channels,
yeah.
and at 12 o'clock at night, they all went off.
Never
There
even
was
thought
no
about that.
24-hour television.
Wow,
That,
yeah.
that didn't exist.
Mm,
And there would be a test pattern.
mm,
I remember when I was a really little kid, like really little, the first TV show that came on at like 5:30 in the morning was Modern Farmer,
mm,
because like who's up at 5:30? Farmers.
right.
So I'd get up, and then I think at 6 a.m. like early bird cartoons came on, and you
Okay.
could watch cartoons.
Modern
But if I
farmer.
got up before 6, something like that, I could be off by a half hour.
Either
I don't
way, it's a
remember.
show
I was
from-
pretty young. Sometimes I was forced to watch Modern Farmer,
Uh-huh.
which was fine because I was 5 years old. What did I know? It's like I'm watching Modern Farmer, But and then you'd have newspapers, and then you'd have the news on at 6 o'clock,
Mm,
and that was it. The news would be a half hour or something.
mm,
And so, like, I mean, I remember being a teenager and reading the book Wuthering Heights,
mm.
which was a book about life in like the 1700s, I believe, something like that. And I thought it was fascinating even then.
Mm.
I'm talking about in 1971 when I read this book.
Yeah.
That like there'd be a person and their closest neighbor was 3 miles away.
Different.
So they
time.
wouldn't even see anyone. So I was thinking at the time, like, wow, like what a wonderful thing to be just with your own thoughts, and you could paint and draw and play the piano or like
Yeah.
write or just be creative. Like it's just you.
Mhm.
Like you're not distracted. And in 1971, I'm thinking that, like, wow, that must have been so wonderful and so peaceful.
Right.
And now you fast forward to now, and like, it's a very sad thing because people, they don't even have a concept of what peace of mind is or to be alone with your own thoughts. There's a saying, like, are robots going to like take over? What are we
Sure.
going to do when robots take over the whole world?
Mhm.
And then the response to that is, well, what's far worse is that the humans that are here now get turned into robots
Mm.
because of technology.
Sure.
We don't need to. Robots aren't going to take over because humans will
We're just
become
becoming
robots,
Yeah.
which has happened.
Pretty much.
And it's very tough, even for somebody like me who grew up in a completely different culture,
Mm.
because, the phone and technology and social media, just by the very nature of it, is addicting. And
Yeah.
it taps into all of these sort of subconscious things that people don't. I mean, I purposely try to get away from my phone
Mm.
every day for a certain amount of time. Or, I just make sure I'm involved in other things. But I mean, it's difficult. People expect you, if they
Oh,
text
yeah.
you to get an answer. Like, I don't have alerts on my phone because
Mm.
I don't want to be alerted
Yeah. I turned that
for,
off as well,
for
actually.
anything.
It made a big difference, actually, from just
I,
not getting these constant notifications.
I'll get texts. That's fine. Those are the only alerts I get.
Mm.
But like Alan Paul, my co-writer, has alerts for everything.
Mm.
He flips out if he's like, "You didn't see that email?" I'm like, "No, I haven't looked at emails since this morning."
Yeah.
And it's
There
like
used to be
6
a
o'clock at
thing
night.
such as business hours,
Yeah.
and now there's no such thing.
Well, and that's a sad thing too.
Yeah.
So, he'll be like, "How could you not?" Like, he just doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
And it's not because he's young.
Mm.
It's just because he embraces
Sure.
those technological things.
Mm.
But I think there's a lot that's lost and will probably never come back because, like, I don't know. It's a funny thing. Like, there's different sides of it. You and Wyatt, my son, grew up playing video games, Xbox and PlayStation and stuff like that. And so when I started playing those games with Wyatt and Rory when they were little kids,
Mm-hmm.
I looked at it like, oh, okay, there are these systems that are very elaborate. And then many video games are very similar in that, there are levels.
Mm.
And then levels become more elaborate, more complex as you go through the game.
Sure.
But if you play the game enough times, or depending on the game, what the game is, this changed, of course, but you reach the point where the first level of the game, you end up memorizing everything in every level.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking at the time is, okay, my kids are like 10 years old and they are able to mentally visualize an environment that's so complex,
Mm.
and they are not questioning it. Like, their brains are actually getting trained
Right.
in a fascinating way
Mm.
to take in like a massive amount of information
Mm-hmm.
and store it that's going to turn out to be in some kind of a useful way.
You're actually forward thinking, because the studies of, like, back in the day, everyone was like, "Oh, video games are bad. Like, this is not good for kids growing up. It's not healthy." But now it's very evident. Like, social media is the far more evil of the two
Oh, God, yeah.
evils. So they're comparing like video games to social media now, and they're like, video games way more social. At least you're being social. You play online, you communicate with people, and as you said, like, you're training your brain in certain ways. So
That's even the next level, like which
Mhm.
Wyatt got into with Half-Life, I guess, whatever those games are called. I don't remember. It's not Mortal Kombat. What was the other one?
maybe Halo.
Halo.
Yeah, Halo was on
You know.
Xbox.
I don't know what they're called.
Um,
Yeah, he'd be like go in his room and he'd have the headphone thing on and he'd
Yeah.
be saying, I'm playing with this kid in China,
Yeah.
And so it became social.
Mm-hmm.
But just the thing of like, oh, like you get to level 4 in this game and there's like 7 or 8 or 10 different arenas,
Mm-hmm.
like areas in that level. And then there's 35 things that could happen in that one area of that one level.
Mm-hmm.
But like they're able to process all of this stuff so that when they've played the game enough times, you get to whatever this area is in level 4, and they know every single.
It's very technical.
And it's a lot of information to absorb.
Well, I think you're very forward thinking, because like even now there's stuff called esports. I don't know if you're aware, but esports is literally
Don't say that's like a Twitch TV.
Esports.
Twitch is probably part of it.
Twitch is part. That Twitch is where people live stream themselves playing.
I know what Twitch is because
esports.
Twitch is the guys that owned Guitar World for a while became Twitch.
Oh, really?
So I have an awareness to Twitch.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, what I'm getting at is like when I say esports, it means electronic sports, and it's just like any video game is now considered a sport. So in like Japan and especially China right now, League of Legends is a massive game. It's like multiplayer game where you play
Right.
online. And, there's this guy, Ninja, who plays Fortnite
Right.
and gets paid a shit ton of, like
No, I know.
millions of dollars.
No, it's crazy.
So it's just,
It's
fascinating to
Twitch
see.
is all about that.
Yeah, it's mostly, Twitch is about any live streaming, pretty much anything, I think, but it focuses on video games.
Well, so, I could appreciate that element of technology at the time. Like, okay, like they're training their brains, for systems, for like the absorption and understanding of complex systems in an interesting way. So I like that aspect of it. Like I thought, well, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember funny things like Wyatt would say, "Oh, play this game with me," and I go, "All right." And he'd be like, "Okay, so first thing is you have to pick your character."
Okay.
And I'd be like, "I don't care.
Yeah.
What difference does that make?"
Yeah.
I'm used to like when you play pinball, like it's your turn, you play.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you have to pick a guy.
Yeah.
All right. So you start going through the menus. Which guy do you want?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. Okay, that guy. What do you want him to be wearing?
Oh,
And I would say to Wyatt, I'd go, are we ever going to play the game? And he would be like, what's your heart? Like, what is your problem? Like, this is, like, he didn't understand how, for me and my generation or understanding, like that, like to him, it was just all part of it. So why would you be protesting any part of it? Oh, now you need to pick your weapons. I'd be like, that's it. I'm out. I can't. And he would get really frustrated. He'd be like, he'd be like, you have serious mental problems, like, you have no patience.
I think Wyatt could be a comedian.
And I would be like, maybe you're right. Like, I have no patience, but it's sort of nice in a way, thinking about it. Because he's like, no, this is playing the game.
This is the experience.
This is the experience of the game.
Yeah.
I'm going to create this my online persona.
I'm more similar to you though. I don't get into that stuff. Like for me, the games that I like is, for example, Guitar Hero actually.
Well, he really liked Guitar Hero too.
So and that's like, you can choose the characters and stuff like that. But for me, I don't like The Sims where you're interacting and building these like houses. I like a very monotonous game in a sense where it's just like perfecting something. I don't know if you can understand.
Yeah. No, I guess I do to a certain extent that, like, I don't know. At the same time though, I do think you are, what's the word? Forfeiting, a certain amount of willpower and autonomy when you make the decision to immerse yourself in the realm of this game. You sort of become a slave to all those parameters of the game.
That's interesting.
And so, I'll tell you what, like first time I got an iPod, I was like, I want to build my music library in a certain way. And then my kids would be like, that's not how an iPod works. And I would say, well, then it's something wrong with it because it doesn't work in my intuitive way that an iPod's supposed to work. And you learn this about computers, which is like, no, it's a piece of technology that works the way it works. So too bad. So if you don't like the way you have to assemble music in an iPod, you're going to need to learn how to assemble music the way an iPod works because it's just not going to do what you want. And computers are not going to do what you want. Now, some of that has changed a lot as technology has advanced.
Sure.
Because I can't even say HEYSIRI out loud without my phone telling me what to do all the time.
Yeah.
If I say it as an example, like, the other day I said, I should say it. The other day I said, hey, Siri. Oh, it didn't hear me, thank God. But anyway.
Yo, I hope you are enjoying the show. I really enjoy making it. If you are enjoying this episode, it would be awesome if you could take a moment to support the show. You can go to www.shanghaiobserved.com/shop. I have t-shirts, stickers, and some of my original photography on the store. Buying anything truly helps keep this podcast alive. Thanks a bunch. And now, back to the show. Okay, we're back. We're back with Act 2, Observing the Process. And last we left off, I was asking Andy about just drugs in general and the influence on the culture, because it seems like music kind of exploded at the time that, you know, psychedelics and other drugs were starting to be used. And something I found interesting through, I guess Wyatt maybe told me, is like you never really got into hard drugs, or it wasn't really a part of your life. So I wanted to kind of talk to you about how maybe you avoided that kind of stuff, and also your experience with other people and how it affected the influence of the culture.
Well, the first thing I would say is, you know, there've always been substances, as far as I'm aware, you know, in culture throughout, you know, civilization.
Right.
So I don't know how, I don't know what people did in the 12th century, you know. Can I use 4-letter words?
You can use whatever.
Yeah, to get fucked up. I don't know what they did in the 12th century. I know that, you know, absinthe, you know, I think like Edgar Allan Poe or Lewis Carroll or people like that, or Lord Byron, you know, like they were like really into absinthe because it was like a hallucinogen. You really go out there on that shit. And in fact, I mean, it's like comes from like I don't know, either a mold or a woodworm, or something totally weird what absinthe comes from. Excuse me.
I just remember, absinthe has some weird hallucinogenic stuff inside of it.
And you can't even get we tried when I was on the road with Dickie Betts to get like real absinthe, and we were sort of told like, no, like you can buy absinthe here.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have that like poisonous stuff in it that will kill you.
Yeah.
Like you get really high and then you're dead. So that being said, you know, throughout civilization, there's always been different things that people did, you know, like Lewis Carroll, you know, like Alice in Wonderland, eating mushrooms, you know, that affect your body and stuff. And,
sure.
You know, so, you know, the 60s had its own version of that, you know, when I was young, adolescent. But I mean, in the 30s, you know, alcohol was illegal and there was prohibition, and people smoked marijuana and took speed. And, you know, my mother was an actress in the 40s, and like they were all given pep pills, you know, to keep you up.
In New York or?
Yeah. Oh. And people didn't even think twice about it. Like, oh, take a pep pill. I'll give you some energy.
You know, people think that Trump is on like pep pills.
He is. No, he's crushing Adderall and snorting it.
Yeah.
That's what the guy at The Apprentice said. But I've been saying for years that Trump's on drugs.
How can you like go
Hitler
that
was
hard?
a speed freak.
That I've heard as well. That's pretty wild.
So, you know, Trump's already just like Hitler. So he's even more like Hitler because they're both drug addicts. But, yeah, I mean, and what goes along with that, or, you know, like just massive paranoia and you know, these other things that
obviously
Trump suffers
downsides.
from. These are like the least of his problems. His drug-induced paranoia like is one of the best things about him. But anyway, you know, I mean, I didn't know that. What I'm talking about now, I didn't have any awareness of that when I was 10 or 12 years old.
Right.
But I did know when I was 12 in 1968 that, you know, people were smoking pot. And I smoked pot when I was 12 years old for the first time. And, but, you know, like I had friends who liked pot a lot, and I liked pot for a while, but, you know, I guess in my own case, and I started taking LSD when I was 15 and 16. I took a lot of LSD, and I liked it, and I was drawing a lot, and so I didn't drink a lot. My parents didn't drink a lot. You know, a
Mm.
lot of it has to do with your parents, you know, like the environment you grew up in.
Mm.
My parents did drink. We had a liquor cabinet, you know, in those days. Everybody had a liquor cabinet in their house. And when you're 12, you'd raid the liquor cabinet when your
Sure,
parents weren't
sure.
looking and, you know, try to sneak some scotch or whatever. Um, yeah, it's all normal stuff.
Mhm.
But I mean, you know, some households suffered from true alcoholism, and that can be an inherited trait
Sure.
anyway, along with just the nature versus nurture, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And so, just in my own personal experience, my parents drank, but you know, it was like a non-issue. There was alcohol in the house, so
Mm.
typical kid stuff. You know, you could get drunk or sneak some alcohol, whatever. And smoking marijuana for a while. And then, I had friends that took way more LSD than I did, and friends who did way less LSD than I did.
Mhm.
And guys that were compelled to get their hands on pure liquid LSD, like
Right.
pharmaceutical LSD,
Mm.
which was the LSD that was available before it became illegal.
It's crazy. It
Because
became
LSD didn't become illegal until like 1966 or 7 or
That's
something like
wild.
that.
Yeah.
It wasn't illegal. So, that's a whole other topic.
Sure, sure.
But like in very simple terms, I think people look at marijuana and even hallucinogens as sort of benevolent, non-dangerous drugs,
Mm.
only in comparison
Right.
to cocaine and crack and heroin and meth. And I mean, there was speed around when I was a kid.
Mm.
And so like I experienced that, and there were barbiturates around when I was a
Mm.
kid. Um like there were quaaludes, but even before quaaludes there was other drugs. So yeah, I mean, I took all those things,
Mhm.
and survived, thankfully. Um, didn't do any of them to excess just because of my own personality or whatever it is.
Mm.
You know, I think that people who don't have an addictive personality for substances are lucky, because it's not necessarily something that you have control over.
Absolutely.
It's just the way you are. And
Mhm.
so, like cigarettes, I smoked cigarettes for a short period of time, very short. And I remember being like 16 or 17 years old and waking up in the middle of the night. And my dad smoked like crazy,
Mm.
and my mom smoked some. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and my first thought was, I want to have a cigarette. And then I thought, well, that's the stupidest thing in the world. It's the middle of the night. I don't want to have it. Like, how
Yeah.
stupid is that? And so I never smoked another cigarette. Not never, but pretty much never smoked
Never
another cigarette,
habitually, yeah.
because I just looked at it like, well, it's so stupid.
Mm.
Like, I don't want to be chained to cigarettes like my dad
Yeah.
is. And so, but it wasn't. It was the easiest thing in the world.
I think I'm
And
very
so there
lucky
was a
as
period of
well,
time
yeah.
where I liked cocaine, but when I didn't, I stopped doing it.
Mm.
And it was like a non-issue, where it's
Right.
not like that for a lot of people.
Mm.
Alcohol isn't that way. Cigarettes are not that way. Um, it just is not that way.
Mm.
Their personalities are different. So when I was doing cocaine, I liked it, and then I didn't like it. And it was the same thing with LSD. There was a period of time I liked it, and then I started to not like it.
Mm.
And so I didn't do it anymore. Like, it was the easiest thing in the world to not do it.
So I guess it's just not binding to your drugs in general. We're just not binding to your personality or the way you lived your life. It
I
was
don't
like
know
you could
what,
take it or leave it.
maybe it's physiological, like
Yeah.
or a combination of psychological and physiological. I don't know. It probably is
Yeah.
a combination.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, even more so than take it or leave it. I
Mm.
left it.
Right.
It wasn't even take it or leave it. It was
Mm.
like when it was time to leave it, it was time to leave it for good.
Mm.
And so when I stopped doing cocaine, I was like, I'm never going to do that again, because
Mm.
I see what it is. I experienced it.
Yeah.
Hey, this is fun. oh, it's okay.
Mhm.
Oh, this is horrible.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it.
Right.
So why would I go back?
Mm.
And it's sort of mind-boggling to me that people still do cocaine,
Mm.
and it's very prevalent. Because I'm like, don't they know that it's horrible? Like, why are they doing that? Like,
Mm.
it's so stupid. But alcohol is like that for some people.
Mm.
And the problem with alcohol is it's so socially acceptable and it's not illegal.
Right.
So that's why it's much more of a struggle for people who can't drink
Mm.
because they're surrounded by it all the time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
on some level, there's probably a sense of, maybe I have some sort of a deficiency because I can't be a social drinker. I can't do
Mm.
it. But I think somebody like Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know, he knew he had to be sober. He knew he couldn't live life with alcohol in his life.
Mm.
He couldn't. So he said it was a struggle, but it wasn't an impossible struggle. I mean, Keith Richards said something funny about heroin. He had been a heroin addict.
Sure.
And so he'd been asked a million times, like, how difficult was it to get off heroin? And he said, look, he goes, and Keith, I mean, I don't know how much we can believe Keith has stayed sober. I mean, what's weird is to a lot of those guys, if you do heroin, you're a drug addict.
Mm.
If you don't, you're not. Well, what about everything else? Well,
Mm.
everything else doesn't count if you're not a heroin addict. They really look at it that way,
Mm.
which is kind of crazy, but they do. So Keith said, I don't deserve any credit because I got off of heroin. He goes, being a heroin addict, it's not like getting your leg blown off and then now your leg is gone and it's not going to grow back.
Yeah.
He goes, you could stop
Yeah.
and then you're not a heroin addict anymore.
Mm.
It's not like when your leg's blown off and your leg is now gone.
Yeah.
He goes, I stopped. He goes, it fucked up my life and it was a disaster when it was happening. So I don't know. But every day, like every human being has a choice, whether they know it or not, of what you want to fill up your day with,
Mm.
and it's becoming tougher with social media and television and everything else.
Mm.
And, like we're not as free, as the whole concept of free will is a fascinating one.
Right. We could go
Because
forever.
you might think you're walking through every day of your life living based on total free will, but you're not. So, what are the determining factors in your daily life that are contributing to the part of your life that is not your free will?
Mm.
I mean, that's a
Tricky topic.
philosophical question.
Yeah. Some people think we're living in a simulation.
Yeah. Or they think that every part of their life is free will.
Mm.
But anyway, I don't think there's an answer.
Right.
There's one answer to that. I don't know if that answers your question about drugs.
Well, it's interesting, and just on another level, the influence it had on there was a boom, a revolution in music, I guess one could say, in the 60s, 70s. So was drugs instrumental in making that happen?
Absolutely.
Okay, so because
but drugs were instrumental in bebop and jazz.
Mm.
Those guys were all heroin addicts.
Okay.
Or not. I mean, that's a generalization.
Right.
But Charlie Parker, who was like the guy who invented bebop, was a heroin addict. Dizzy Gillespie, the co-inventor of bebop, was not.
Mm.
But I mean, a lot of things happened in the arts because of alcohol and psychedelic drugs and heroin and morphine and opium. I mean, they open up the doors to creativity in different ways.
Right.
So that can't be denied, and whether it's good or bad, I don't know. It just is a fact, it's just, it's a real thing. And so successful, very creative musicians like Paul McCartney and John Lennon have talked about how marijuana and LSD help them be creative and tap into creativity in a different way and make them think about things in a different way.
Mm.
And so I don't think it can be denied, but it's not true for everyone. But I mean, the downside of all this is, aside from the obvious, that most of these things are illegal, so you could go to jail.
Sure.
And then you have to, if you want that to be part of your life, you know, ensnare yourself in these networks, you know, to facilitate doing these things. And I don't know, you know, like the heroin thing, just in a really simple sense, I knew I never wanted to do heroin, go near it, because I figured it had to be really good, because too many people became heroin addicts and liked it too much,
Right.
and people I knew. And so it was really easy choice for me, because I knew it was a dead end. So I said, I don't want to know, like, if it's great.
Right.
Not interested. Now, what's sort of funny is I've had like operations where they loaded me up with morphine.
Oh, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the same thing.
And I felt like, wow, I could fly. I could like jump over a building. I feel I've never felt this great in my whole life.
Yeah.
And so I know what it is to be, you know, your serotonin levels get, you know, screwed around with to a certain level, and you feel amazing. But anyway, it's just too much of a risk. And then in a really simple way, when I knew that we were going to have our first child, you know, that drugs just couldn't be part of my life. It was just ridiculous. You know, I was supposed to be a responsible adult at this point. As bad as I knew it would be for me, it was like a non-tenable situation if I was going to be a parent.
Makes
like,
sense.
Didn't make any sense. And I'm lucky that I didn't have this issue with alcohol. So it wasn't like, oh, I shouldn't do cocaine or any other drugs because I'm going to be a parent, but I'm going to drink. You know, like, it's not going to have an effect on
Drinking
the
can
fact
be
that I drink
just
too
as
much,
bad.
because
Yeah.
I didn't. Well, it's much more insidious because it's part of life. So anyway,
Yeah.
but you know, it's in talking to Stevie about it and other people who were dependent on drugs or became drug addicts. And David Crosby says this in, I think, the new documentary on him. He says that being straight after being high forever was like the highest he ever felt.
Wow.
Being sober felt more high than being high. And on some level, it can be like that, because you can have a heightened sense of awareness that you want that. That's much more appealing. And it comes from actually being healthy.
Yeah, you got to hit these low lows to really appreciate a higher, like, high, not to get.
Or it's just different, you know, like it's a different, you know, your brain chemistry is working differently. So anyway, everybody's different, you know. I think that you need to be compassionate to people who are prone to addiction, because it's not a choice that they make. And if you're not, you're lucky. You know,
Definitely.
you're lucky that your DNA is put together in that way. That didn't happen.
100%. So my next question, I heard from my dad. I don't even know how he brought it up, that you went on a yacht with Paul Allen, I believe. So I wanted to hear about this experience and how you were invited. And I believe you taught him guitar, or?
Yes, that's how that whole thing happened. So
Okay.
Paul Allen started Microsoft with Bill Gates, and very, 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 very successful, worth billions of dollars. And he's from Seattle. He's 2 years older than me, 2, 3 years older than me, and big Jimi Hendrix fan. And so I first met him in 2000 or 2001, something like that. I think it was 2000. He built a museum called the EMP, Experience Music Project, and which is now called MoPop, Museum of Pop Culture. And it's like a rock and roll Hall of Fame. But Jimi Hendrix is his favorite musician of all time, and Paul plays guitar. So I went to EMP to play with Buddy Miles and Buddy Guy, and the guys in Double Trouble. and I met Paul. Paul got up and played with us.
Hmm.
And then, different events over the years, I'd go to Seattle for different things, and sometimes he would be there. And so I can't remember what year it was. I have to really think about it. Maybe in 2010,
Hmm. Shot in the dark.
11. I'm not sure.
Either way.
I went out to play a thing called the Founders Awards with Billy Cox, the Jimi Hendrix's bass player, and we rehearsed at Paul's house. And I had done that a few times, and so I started to talk to Paul. And he's a very nice guy, but he was very, very guarded.
Hmm.
And so in 2013, after knowing him for 13 years, out of the blue, he asked me if I would create guitar lessons for him, like video lessons for him.
Right.
And he had a whole long list of things that he wanted. And most of it was Jimi Hendrix related at first. But over the next few years, he died last
recently, right?
October.
Yeah.
So it's only a year and 2 months.
Hmm.
So 2018, between 2013 and 2018, I created hundreds of video lessons for him on Jimi Hendrix and Robin Trower and Steve Ray Vaughan and Jeff Beck and a guitar player named Bill Nelson who had a band called Bebop Deluxe. He liked Bebop Deluxe a lot. And Paul was funny. Like he would email me, he'd send me like 20 emails in a row. And like at first, by the third email, I'd say, hey, this is my cell phone. You can call me if you want to. But Paul would never talk on the phone.
Strange.
Like he just wouldn't do it. I think it's because he wanted to be able to control the conversation. It's really easy to control via email.
Right.
Because you just stop responding.
Yeah.
A phone call is you're kind of trapped.
Huh.
I think that's what it was. It just was a more comfortable mode of communication for him. No, he would never talk on the phone, ever.
Wow.
So anyway, but he's a very sweet guy. And he was the owner of the Seattle Seahawks. And when the Seahawks got in the Super Bowl, I'm going to get all my years confused, but let's say 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that. So they were going to the Super Bowl, and Wyatt's in college, and I said, I'm going to send him an email. I'm going to say, congratulations. And the Super Bowl was being played at Giant Stadium in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
So I said, I'm going to just say, I don't know if there's any way, that I could come with my son. It'd be great. And Wyatt was like, yeah, you should ask him. And then he wrote back, well, you're invited. You want to come, just come show up at this hotel in New York City. And we'll take a bus out to
That's so sick.
stadium. And then they won. And then we went to the after party. And it was a big jam. And we played. And Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi were good friends of Paul's. So they were there. And Wyatt knew who Derek Trucks was, but he didn't know who Susan Tedeschi was. And so he's meeting them. And then she gets up to sing. And he's like, wow, Sally sings her ass off. I'm like, it's Susan, But it was just funny because he was so innocent. Like she was just like, somebody that he met. Like he didn't know anything. And she got up and her singing was phenomenal. And he was just like, wow, she's really good. And Macklemore or whatever the rapper guys.
Sure.
They were there.
Okay.
And anyway, and then they go to the Super Bowl the next year. But it was in Arizona. So Wyatt's like, are you going to get invited again? And I was like, I don't think so. People were asking me because they knew I went to the Super Bowl. They're like, you going to go to the Super Bowl? And I'm like, no, it's in Arizona. Like, it's ridiculous. And I get an email. You're cordially invited to. So we go to that too.
Yeah.
And then he invited me on this cruise. So the first cruise was, I guess, 4 years ago now. And, me and Tracy, my wife, and we get invited, you and a guest cordially invited to fly to Singapore, get on this cruise ship. It's not his yacht. It was a cruise ship, part of this Regent line in Asia. Most beautiful, insane. an 11-deck cruise ship, which by comparison, like Royal Caribbean and Carnival, those are like 16-deck. They're bigger. 11-deck is big enough. Like it's pretty big, but it's in a way it's a little more personal than a 16-deck boat.
Right.
Those things are like like 10 hotels
Mhm.
put together. But the thing is, a boat like that can accommodate like 2,000 people.
Mhm.
There were 200 people
Wow.
because Paul, it was just for his guests.
Yeah, balling out.
And that first year, the other people on the cruise were David Crosby, Quentin Tarantino, Quincy Jones, The Pretenders, Derek and Susan, Rufus Wainwright, Julian Lennon, Nick Mason from Pink Floyd. I'm going to leave out like 100 people.
Yeah, of course.
Jim Sheridan, who wrote My Left Foot and In the Name of the Father. I mean, it was nuts. Like we were like, why are we here?
Right. That's
like,
what
how did we get invited?
That's what
to
my
this?
question is. Like, you're just there to mingle. Like, you're just there.
Oh,
like,
Jeff Goldblum. But everybody was like the same. Everybody was like,
why are we?
I'm the luckiest person to be invited on this trip. Like this 12-day trip.
Yeah.
Fly to Singapore. We stay at the Marina Bay Sands, most amazing hotel. The hotel where Trump had his summit meeting with Kim Jong-un. Same hotel.
Oh yeah.
All those years later.
Huh.
No, it's considered like one of the most amazing hotels on the planet. And
Is it the one with the massive rooftop?
Massive rooftop,
Yeah, I've been to Singapore.
infinity pool.
I saw that. I could see it from when I was at the Botanical
Yeah,
Gardens.
you could see it. Yeah, it's nuts. And then we got on the cruise ship and we went to Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei. 5.5-hour boat trip down the Mekong Delta in a little wooden boat. That was amazing, incredible, with Rufus Wainwright and his husband. And played with Rufus, played across the universe, played with Julian Lennon, did Stand By Me. Like it was just like, but everybody, it was like it's a combination of conservationists, brain scientists, musicians, actors, Paul's friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you get your life set up, that's the best thing you could possibly do.
And Paul's just a good guy. Like he's a really generous, sweet, very, very sweet person, really nice person. And also on the cruise were like his childhood friends, his 8th grade science teacher, who's, like in his 80s.
That's so
like he stayed
sick.
friends with these people.
Yeah.
Like that's Paul, he's just a good person, really down to earth guy. So, so then we get invited to another cruise 3 years later, which we couldn't believe because, like we were like, is there going to be another cruise, And then there's another cruise. So the cruise was set for March of 2019. And in October of 2018, Paul puts a tweet out saying he had beaten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma twice. And he said it came back, and I'm going to do everything I can to beat it. And then he died in 3 weeks. It's really terrible. 65 years old. So we all thought, well, there's no cruise. I mean, like, Paul passed away. But then his sister let everybody know, Jody, that Paul's wishes for the cruise to happen. And so we went, and it served as like a big memorial for Paul.
That's amazing.
And it was nice. And it was some of the same people, but it was some different people too. And, we played a lot of music, and Penn and Teller were there this time, who did a show. Lawrence Fishburne was there, the actor, who's a great guy, who got up and sang a Hendrix song. And I think he said he had known Hendrix a little bit. So anyway, that's the Paul Allen story. Obviously, Tracy and I were like, these are things we never would have experienced without being invited by Paul.
Sure.
But I mean, everybody felt that way. People, who are extremely successful and wealthy felt like I never would have had this experience. And then he used the opportunity to talk about all of his work in conservation and saving the planet and saving the elephants and tireless work. There were lectures every night on the boat from these people that were, activists and geniuses, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty awesome. And for some reason, Quentin Tarantino sticks out a bunch in my head. Did you ever get to talk to him? Or
we talked to him a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, he was great.
It seems like, I don't know. I like the way he does interviews, and obviously I love his movies. And
He was really nice. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't know what to expect. He couldn't have been nicer. But you know
Yeah.
what? I'm gonna have.
So let's wrap this up. As we're wrapping up, do you have any future projects coming up, or?
Well, I mean, the spin-off of the book is there's 2 movies.
Oh,
There's
really?
a documentary with Richard Linklater,
Hmm.
and then the biopic. It hasn't been confirmed 100% who we're doing the biopic with, but we think we know who we're doing it with, and so that's on the horizon. I mean, we're
Awesome.
working on the documentary now, but not in a super intense way.
Hmm.
We're contributing content right now, and so that's exciting. And then other than that, I still write for Guitar World. I still create instructional material for them and for True Fire, and I still play. And I'm in like 6 different bands, and so just I want to put more records out of my own music and maybe write another book, and so
Awesome. Sounds great.
Wyatt's coming home. I can get to see him.
Awesome.
That's coming.
Sweet. Andy, thank you so much for your time. It was great.
Yes, great to talk to you, Alan.
All right. Bye, guys.
Boom. That's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast valuable, there are many ways you can support it. You can rate and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. You can share it with your friends, you can blog about it, or discuss it on your own podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to this channel and like the video, or you can support it directly. You can do this by going to my website. I'll leave a link in the description. Thank you for supporting the show. Listeners like you make it possible. Also, if you enjoyed the intro and outro music, it was made by my brother, Danny Greenberg. You can go and check out his beats at soundcloud.com/estoric. ESTORIC. Okay, that's it for now. Peace.